to another episode of Strictly Healthy. And all my episodes are really great and exciting. But I'm especially blessed today to have the police commissioner from Devon and Cornwall joining me today. And this is episode 17, and she will be talking about sort of looking at emotional health and what we can do to sort of safeguard ourselves. She'll be looking at crime and protection, especially for women. So we welcome Alison to the studio. Hi,
Hello.
Alison. Thank you for joining me today on Strictly Healthy Show. Now, let's see, I've got a whole raft of questions here for you. First of all, the elections are coming up for police commissioner, so I want to just talk a bit about that today. And actually, look what I got in the post today. I don't know. I've just landed on my doorstep today, actually.
Good to see.
Sorry?
Good to see. Good to see. You're on the election roll, so you can vote.
Yes, indeed. Now, I guess my question for you is, I don't know what your competition is in terms of these elections. Are you able to share any details about who else is sort of on the list and candidates for the elections for a commissioner?
Yes, so at the moment, none of us are formally declared candidates because you have to put a nomination paper in to Exeter City Council, who oversee it all. And so as a result, I'm not officially declared until that nomination paper has gone in. So at the moment, as far as I'm aware, we've got, there's a few different political parties standing. There may be an independent. So we just have to wait and see. It'll be around the 6th of April when it will be formally declared who the candidates are.
Oh, I see. 6th of April. Okay. Keep that in mind. So what do you think your chances are of being re-elected?
Well,
because you've been in the post, 5 years or so?
Yeah, I've had an extra year because of the pandemic. They postponed the elections that should have been last year. And yeah, so I've had an extra year. My goodness, what a year it's been. And I mean, policing have very much, led the response to the policing the pandemic across all of the agencies. They've been coordinating the response as soon as we went into the first lockdown. So it's been a busy period. But yeah, I've been here 5 years now, and normally it's a 4-year term. And I'm only the second police and crime commissioner ever elected for Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. So we're a new role still. So when you say what are your chances, I think our challenge is helping our community know we're here and motivating them to go out to vote. So I would say in terms of we've got local elections at the same time. So we work as a team and we'll all be trying to communicate about getting people motivated to be out and vote on May the 6th. So I couldn't tell you what my chances are because you can never tell.
And you haven't exactly had an easy time of it, have you? I think you seem to have had a bit of a rough ride in that people seem to really keep their beady eye on you to make sure they keep you also in check.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important, actually. It's a bit like the role of the media. They play a really important role in helping scrutinise elected officials. So, people take notice of what's in the media, no matter what that media is, whether it's Twitter or it's actually an official outlet. So, yeah, I've had lots of people poking around at me. And I will say I'm one of the very, very few women in elected office that get very little trolling. Not like an MP. Even some councillors have very, very difficult times from being trolled or personally attacked in terms of strangers just deciding to be rude and obnoxious. And I'm really lucky that I don't seem to attract that sort of attention. So, yeah.
Goodness for that. That's good. Yes. So I didn't realize that the role of a commissioner, you can set or you can keep the constable really in check and even dismiss him if necessary. Is that right? And you're sort of second in rank to well, not yourself, but your post is second in rank to sort of the secretary, like Priti Patel. Is that, have I got
It
that right?
is. We play a similar role to the Home Secretary at a local level. So as the Home Secretary, she actually has a stronger role with the Met Police because she appoints the Commissioner of the Met. So there's a different relationship slightly there. Even though the Mayor is supposed to be overseeing policing, she has a role in the appointment of the Commissioner as well. But yeah, we do. We act like a Home Secretary for our area, and we focus on what local people think, want and need from a policing service, and we help the Chief Constable. Best way I can describe it is I don't direct the Chief Constable. I help the Chief Constable to understand what the public are expecting, and then I monitor and ask him for action plans or how he's going to deliver on that, and I hold him to account for it. So it's a relationship whereby really, even though the chief is independently operational, he will often consult me on matters, and I will always consult him on policy settings. So it's a two-way relationship.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, well, we might as well get into it because today we're really wanting to talk about what the police are doing to help protect women in the public sector or public eye, as well as domestically, so domestic situations. So what are the police in Devon and Cornwall actually doing in that regard?
Well, I'll speak about two aspects really, because there's what the police is doing and then there's what my office is doing. And we are a separate organisation. The Office of Police and Crime Commissioner is a separate organisation to policing. I'm a corporation sole and the Chief Constable is a corporation sole. And what that means is that we are businesses in our own right. We have executive decision-making powers. We don't need to go through committees to get things done. So it's quite a quick and dynamic decision-making process. So in terms of policing, you've got all the usual stuff that goes on around helping people who are either, had a crime happen to them and need an investigation. But in the pandemic, they particularly focused because we went down about 22% as soon as we went into the first lockdown of crime overall. But domestic abuse did not drop. Domestic abuse has stayed around the same level or increased just a little bit. It's not reduced. So there's been quite a lot of activity from policing in targeting the known people that we already have in the system, if you like, making sure they're safe, making sure they were protected in lockdown. And my office actually commissioned with Operation Encompass, which is an amazing scheme set up by two amazing individuals, David and Elizabeth Carney-Howarth. And basically, we set up the Teachers Helpline in conversation with with them in the pandemic. We decided teachers needed support who may be looking after children who they wouldn't normally teach, who they might not normally know, because not all children were back in school. And so they had all different situations going on. So the Teachers Helpline, which is run by psychologists, and they can access that helpline every day. We funded that in the beginning of the pandemic. The government took it over and are now funding it for all teachers throughout the country as part of the pandemic. So really important things about what we're doing to help children in particular be well supported when they've witnessed or been a victim of domestic abuse. And I think that's where the domestic abuse bill is going, about making children a victim in their own right. So yeah, quite a big achievement actually for Devon and Cornwall, what we've done there.
Oh, good. But I just want to pick up on something you said a little while back, and that is about domestic abuse has gone up just a little bit. I understood from the reports in the news, etc., that it had gone up quite a bit because people are sort of stuck together. They couldn't go anywhere. They had to stay at home, according to the Prime Minister. So you're saying it didn't go up that much.
Well,
so what's the differentiation there?
Yeah, so nationally, when you add it all together, it'll have gone up quite a bit. But from a local perspective, in the first 3 months of the pandemic, we stayed around the same that we would normally have. We stayed around the same levels, and since then it has increased, but not dramatically, not to the extent of 50%. And I think the bit for us is we think at the moment, because I fund a lot of the victim care support network for women and men who are suffering from abuse. And they were not getting the referrals. They were not necessarily as swift and able to be dynamic in helping people when they were working from home. They didn't have all the technology they needed to be able to do it. So there's been a big push with some help from money from the government to help make sure charitable and voluntary bodies who are there to support people in need have been able to access funding to make sure they can still function in a remote setting. And now it's incredible. We've had counselling done remotely, online, where you haven't had to go to an office to have it. We've had people give lots of one-to-one help to people over the internet. It's been quite an incredible transformation. So I think what we found, though, is people who are in lockdown at the moment, we did also commissioned a 24/7 victim support web chat and telephone line, which we didn't have before. It was office hours kind of thing with a bit in the evenings. Our victim care unit, we commissioned that so that there was reach 24/7 for people, because not everybody does want to go to the police. Some people just want some advice. Some people want support, and a lot of people, we found when we opened up that online 24/7 web chat, people were ruminating in COVID, and actually historic offences were coming to their mind, which they hadn't dealt with, and actually they were reaching out for support. So I think it's been a mix of new offences, existing people still struggling, and people from historic offences that haven't been dealt with have really come to mind in COVID.
Okay. And just in terms of shelter and refuge for people, were they able to get to some of these places in the time of COVID?
Yeah, there was an incredible, Women's Aid worked with rail companies to get free transport for women during COVID so that they could get on a train and get to a refuge. So if you got referred to a refuge, because they were still open, you were able to get free transport to it as well through the train line. And I think there's been quite a lot of innovation that sort of happened during this pandemic, because people were determined to still deliver a service, and people have just been incredible in helping out. And I've got to thank Great Western Railway. They were one of the supporters to try and help people reach a refuge where they were referred to. So I think that's been incredible. And there's been a lot of talk about needing more spaces for women particularly to flee to with their families, and that's again the domestic abuse bill that's coming through Parliament, which I have to say Victoria Atkins as the minister there has been absolutely powerful in driving forward extra funding, driving forward changes to that bill, and I think it's going to be really, really powerful. One of the things that's in there that I think's really interesting is non-fatal strangulation is being considered as part of the crime of abuse. And it sounds really strange, doesn't it? Because often and I've heard and I've experienced it, a man will grab you by the throat as a form of overwhelming you and stopping you. They may not leave bruises, they may not actually choke you, but this happens frequently in abusive relationships. And I think the fact that it's been recognised and will be recognised nationally is actually powerful, really powerful, about saying this is not normal. You should not be tolerating this in your life.
Now, speaking of that, are there any initiatives to help women to learn how to defend themselves, or, in those situations?
Well, I think at the moment, because we've had this really terrible murder in London of Sarah Everard, and it's really sparked people's thinking about the safety of women. For us, we have had a terrible murder of Lorraine Cox in Exeter, and she didn't get the publicity that Sarah has, and I feel saddened by it. But we have to remember these incidences are really rare. You are actually more likely to be murdered if you're a man by another man. Violence has got to be fought in every realm, not just against women, against everyone. It is something we've got to try and stamp out, literally. We've got our crime rate is the second lowest in the country, in a whole of England and Wales. Yeah, we're really good. So we were number 3 when I arrived. We were 3rd. We've managed to maintain being number 2. In fact, just before we went into COVID, we got to number 1. but we haven't been able to maintain that. So we're still number 2, but I will be aiming for us to be number 1. But the bulk of our crime now, because we're really good on burglary, even though people still get burgled, we are the lowest in the country. We're low on shoplifting, we're low on car crime, we're low on all these other offences, but violent crime is still the bulk of our crime. So while we're low, the bulk of it is violent crime. So we've got to tackle that. It's not going away.
I'm just curious as to why we are so low in the levels of compared to the nation.
I think there's a number of things. I think firstly, we have a very law-abiding community. So our communities are really good with very low tolerance to crime happening where they are. So they will report very minor incidences to the police and want action. And that actually keeps crime out because they won't tolerate antisocial behaviour. They want to see things done and tackled, and it keeps the police connected with communities. So I think there's part of the law-abiding and low tolerance of our community, which we're lucky to have. We're not very anonymous here. It's a very well structured and quite a stable community in Devon and Cornwall. So we tend to feel accountable to our community slightly differently. Yeah, but also we've got a really good policing service that works with all the partners that you can think of, from the Coast Guard to the local authorities, to the fire service, all focused on trying to reduce crime in our communities. So there's that energy and effort is there to keep it that way. So, and it makes us proud, actually, in Devon and Cornwall to be this way. But we have to fight for resources because people think we don't need it. And that's where crime isn't the only indicator.
Sorry?
Crime is the only indicator. There are other issues we've got here that we're lucky maybe that they don't all turn to crime, but we've got some poverty issues here. We've got, joblessness issues here. We've got really declining high streets, coastal areas. We've got to try it. We've got other issues that we also, which is why we work with partners to try and solve some of those. I was going to say about the housing crisis, the homelessness problem, the housing, people who don't have homes. I've just built a house.
They're building homes every time I turn around. They're jamming them in everywhere.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I know we need housing, but
what's really funny is I've just built a house with prisoners at Ley Hill Prison. They've built the structure. And then we've actually built it on site in Torquay, a beautiful eco home to house somebody who's on the homelessness register. And that was a proof of concept that we could work with the prisons, we could work with probation, and Agile Homes, who's been the company we've worked with, have been fantastic. And we now hope to be able to roll these out because this could really solve a problem that we've got that's bigger than just crime, but it's giving people a purpose who have committed crime.
I just want to go back to something you mentioned about resources. It seems to me, and that's just my own expert opinion, that there are quite a bit more resources than you need. But you're saying that's not the case. You're saying you need more resources in terms of policing.
Oh, absolutely. On a couple of levels, really. One is we won't stay low crime all the time if we're not on top of it. So for us, it's how do we keep ourselves as low as possible? And secondly, our community expects it. Policing is a universal service. One of the challenges that's happened in austerity is naturally where some of the first officers got removed, if you like, didn't get replaced, were in our rural communities. They had to keep the level of officers in our higher crime cities. So there is a challenge that it's not right that a rural community gets such a disservice. So the promise of the Chief Constable and I is that we will start to put officers back and make sure our rural communities feel supported, because policing sets the standards of behaviour in a community, and that proactive foot patrol, which now we've recruited 498 officers. Well, there's 317 already through the process, but we'll be 498 by the end of next year. They'll start finishing their training and going out and being allocated to stations. And it's absolutely the number one priority now of that visible policing foot patrol. Going back to your point about women's safety, we want to know and see police officers around, not just responding to incidents, but being proactive.
And so what else can women do? Like, one question that one of the viewers had asked is how we can protect ourselves online, and especially like in the public arena as well too, and from trollers, etc. But certainly online is definitely an issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. And do you know what? With us being in the pandemic, in the old days, if you like, a few years ago, we'd have said switch it off, right? Switch it off.
Yeah.
You can't switch it off now. It's the main form of communication. So that old argument's gone. I think for us, there are some really good, simple ways and steps that you can take if you're getting any sort of abuse online. I mean, it depends on the type of abuse. I mean, rudeness and all of that, report through the platform. Even if it's horrific, you report through the platform. But you may want to report something to the police if you feel in fear of your life, because some people get threats online about how they're going to come and get them or things like that. So it is really important to report that to the police. 101@dc.police.uk. You can email your concerns if you feel there is a threat to life. And I think there is people don't 101@dc.police.uk. So for us, the other thing is as well that we've just have agreed a funding bid for Exeter as an example. We've got one in Plymouth, Safer Streets Fund, helping a community turn itself around who has high acquisitive crime. And the next one that we're going to be doing is in Exeter, the whole High Street and up to Sidwell Street. And we've very much had a look at that through the lens of women and street harassment, while we were also looking at the acquisitive crime element. So this is about more CCTV, better street lighting, thinking about walking routes. How do we make people feel safe there? What can we do with the businesses? So we've got a £500,000 bid in for Exeter at the moment to see what we can do to improve that. And I think, basic environmental factors affects women's feelings of public safety. Whether or not they want to take that shortcut cut across the park, but it's all dark because it's not lit up at night. Whether or not they like going to a car park and whether or not that's lit up well or not. Some of these things are basic safety factors, hygiene factors for people walking around. So there's some opportunities that are arising that I'm trying to grab from government with extra funding to try and keep people safer here. I did forget to mention, actually, Linda, that we are the #1 highest domestic tourist destination in the country. And this is part of the argument for more resources, because we get millions of visitors every year to Devon and Cornwall, yet we're the second lowest crime rate. And we have a high crime data integrity, which is where you're checking that they're recording all the crime and that it's not that people, are fudging the numbers. So, yeah.
You say that the tourism brings more crime.
Yeah, well, we actually, do you know, some of the issues that tourists bring is they come here to sometimes end their life. They come here to kill themselves. So we have higher rates of suicide in the summer. We have people who go missing in the summer who maybe have a bit of dementia or a family member. We have all sorts of other pulls on the police during the summer. People who go swimming and start and drown. All these things, which there are other agencies to help, but often you'll find the police will be the first port of call because they're 24/7. So we've got, other challenges that those tourists bring that are all excited about being here and maybe not always thinking about their safety.
Mm-hmm. What areas in Devon and Cornwall area are the worst in terms of crime?
So our crime rates are most highest in 3 areas: Plymouth, city centre; Exeter, city centre; Torbay, Torquay town centre. Those are the 3 highest crime areas in Devon and Cornwall. And what those crimes are that relate to, because we've just done, in terms of looking at this bid process, we were looking at robbery, acquisitive crime like shoplifting, car crime, burglaries, commercial and domestic, and violent crime. We know at the moment that we've got some real challenges in those. They always have been the highest. It's been known as the golden triangle of Torbay, Exeter and Plymouth. And it's where a lot of focus is spent on tackling crime.
Okay. And now in terms of, I know we're going off topic a little, but in terms of like scams and things like that, women get caught up sometimes in these dating scams or whatever you want to call it. Is that an issue in this area in the Southwest?
Do you know, it's one of those things that I think people wouldn't report to the police necessarily because they're embarrassed. We've got a lot of this around how women feel embarrassed that it's their fault. We even have this with rape victims. If they were drunk when it happens, women have to stop feeling ashamed and stop being embarrassed about what's happened to them, because I think we're really good at blaming ourselves. And I had this situation when I was a victim of domestic abuse and stalking, and I didn't want to go to the police. I ended up paying a solicitor to send a couple of letters to the person, hoping that would be enough, and it didn't stop. So I think, why are we so embarrassed about it? What we've got a work to do around our own, about our own feelings of what it feels like when you're a victim of crime and how much self-blaming happens. And I think it's under.
I think society was blaming women a lot as well too. Initially, I think they're going away from that and they're changing from that. But initially, a lot of it was looking at the woman and, is her skirt too short, or was she drunk, or that sort of thing. They were blaming women. But it's going away from that now, I think.
We had a recent case that was at Plymouth court that it was about last year, where a man was charged with molesting a woman, inappropriately touching her at an office party, right? His comments were, "But I didn't fancy her." The fact that is even an issue has got nothing to do with whether you get sexually molested, raped, or dealt with really badly by a man. It's got nothing to do with whether they fancy you or not. It's about power, anger, and it's certainly about their entitlement and the issues that they've got, not what women have.
Okay, good. Well, believe it or not, the time has gone so fast. So I just wanted to find out a little bit more. So another subject here, and that is about the G7 coming up, the G7 summit. That's coming up in June. And well, I'd love to be there and be a fly on the wall, to be honest, to be part of it. Are you involved with it in any way?
Well, the police are heavily involved in it. They're overseeing all the policing and security for the event. And what's really fascinating is it's likely that there'll be about 4,000 police officers from across the UK who will be coming to help us for G7. So do you know what one of the challenges is how do we want to make sure that any of those officers who come understand how we police in Devon and Cornwall? So there's something about setting the tone, because we aren't the Met, we're not Avon and Somerset Police, we're not Greater Manchester Police, we are Devon and Cornwall, and we have a particular tone and style of how we police our communities. And so, we've got a real challenge ahead of us on that. I'll be looking forward to seeing what we can do in terms of, I'm not directly involved in the summit itself, but we are looking at the moment to really focus on Vision Zero from my office's perspective, which is trying to zero road deaths and zero seriously injured on our roads. We've got some of the largest road networks in the country, and we want to make sure that we get more people aware of what we need to do on our roads to keep safe.
Ah, okay. But do you think some of these other police groups coming from other cities, would they be more heavy-handed, you think?
Well, that's our worry. We have a style. Neighbourhood policing was born out of Devon and Cornwall. Okay, so we invented neighbourhood policing. It is our style to work with a community, and so we want to just make sure all those officers that come will be well briefed. And also, I'm been reassured by the Chief Constable that any big important elements will always be led by Devon and Cornwall police officers, not from necessarily those outside. So it's going to be an interesting time for Cornwall, isn't it? An interesting time for the UK.
Yes, I think it will be. I'm sort of excited. I wish I could be down there just to see the excitement of what's going on. Just a little bit of fun thing to get into here. Do you watch Line of Duty by chance? And if so, is it fairly true to life, so to speak?
Well, I would say it's quite good in the sense that it's very balanced and shows objectivity, but the level of corruption they seem to find at the highest levels, I have a little chuckle of that to myself. Doesn't feel like that in Devon and Cornwall, that's for sure.
I get
But you've got to have an eye out for it. You know, one of the challenges in policing is you have to be very transparent if you have financial difficulties. You have to tell your employer that you're having financial difficulties, because that is seen as a way in to corruption, of you maybe doing something. So we're very on top of supporting our staff if they go through troubles. We have a very good support network for police officers and staff in this arena. So yeah, it's fascinating though, isn't it?
Yes,
Fascinating.
indeed. Great. Well, I want to thank you, Alison, for joining me today. The time has gone, and I know you're a busy woman, and I appreciate you taking the time out to spend with me today. And hopefully wishing you all the best in terms of re-elections, I guess, for commissioner.
Thank you, Linda. I've got parents' evening tonight, as I said. So that's probably the hardest interviews I've got to do.
Oh, wow. Oh, dear. Well, thank you anyway, Alison.
Thank you for having me.
That was Alison Hernandez, the current Police and Crime Commissioner for Devon and Cornwall. She graciously lent some of her time to share with us what the police are doing in terms of protecting the community, not just women. So we want to thank her for that. So next week, what's coming up next week? Well, if you want to have a good night's sleep, we have a lady coming on, Christina Grabnikas, who will be talking about, she's a nurse practitioner from the University of Central Florida, and she will be sharing some ideas about how to get a good night's sleep. And I've tried some of her ideas and they really work. So I am very excited to see more about that for next week. So please join us then. And we will see you next time.